Oh, nice. Finally. Okay. Alright, so this is the second video of whatever it is I am doing. Yeah, second video. Same day though. Same day as the first video. I'm on the way back now. It's about 4:20. So we left a little earlier than usual. Interesting day. Quite tiring, to be very honest. And we're driving through Baddi again. Driving through Baddi, actually out of Baddi. Yeah, I just crossed the the toll. So I'm out of Baddi now, and I'm heading on to the Haryana highway. A little bit low on fuel. So I've been running an experiment. I mean, you probably know if you've been reading the news that they've started putting 20% ethanol in pretty much all fuels now. E20 blending, I think that's what they're calling it, which basically means that your fuel is not going to be burn that well. The more ethanol you put, the characteristics, the burning properties of the fuel go down. It's got something to do with octane value, I think, but I'm not too familiar on the chemistry. But what you do understand is that the car is burning the fuel, and every sort of, if you take milliliter to be your unit of measurement, every milliliter of fuel will give you some energy value. I'm guessing in joules. Yeah, it should be joules. So with blending ethanol means that the joule value that you get per unit of fuel comes down. So your car is basically burning more fuel to go the same distance or to create the same power, which is not good. It's also supposed to drive fuel prices down, because like if you're blending ethanol is typically supposed to be cheaper than fossil fuel, be it diesel or petrol, whatever you're using. So it should get cheaper in principle. I don't think it has yet. It probably will with time. But yeah, so I mean, I was using the normal fuel, so I've been using the 20 blend. But there is something called HP power. When you fill at an HP pump, they have a pump machine that says HP power, which I think is a higher octane value. I do know it has lower ethanol blending, so it's probably not 20. I'm not really sure how much it is. I think it's like 15 or 16 or something like that. So I did like one tank full of HP power to see how far that takes me, and now I'm doing a tank full of normal fuel. So when I ran HP power, I was able to get 416 kilometers out of 31 liters of fuel, and I filled 31 liters again. No, I didn't actually. I've been measuring it on a cost basis. So I filled 3,000 rupees of fuel, which ended up being 31 liters of normal and 29 point something liters of power fuel. So I want to see how far the 3,000 on power gets me versus the 3,000 on normal fuel, and then make a decision on what I want to be using. But it's not just pure fuel economy. To be very honest, I've been having a lot more fun driving with HP power, because the car is way more peppy. So I would typically need to get to a 3,000 RPM figure to feel like the engine is spooling up a bit, and feel like I'm able to put some good power into the car when I accelerate. The RPM at which I'm able to feel similar levels of power is lower with higher octane fuel, which means that I get power even without pushing the gas or pushing the pedal that too far. So it feels good. The car feels faster. I'm actually, so I have an EV at home, so I was trying to think of it from the EV point of view. So EVs have this thing called regenerative braking, right? Which is when you get power back when you brake the car, it uses it reverses the motors to sort of convert some of your braking force into energy that can be stored in the battery. I'm again not very sure about the exact mechanics of it, but if I just think of it from a physics point of view, you're probably turning the motor the other way, and they have some sort of a magnetic setup up there, and your motion is helping you put charge back into the battery. So whatever they're doing in the car, it's supposed to give you power back. But what happens is when you're driving in the city, you're braking very often, which means that every time you brake, you need to now send power back to the motors to get the car moving again. Versus when the car is rolling and you're not actually putting any power in to accelerate the car, you're moving at the same speed. So I was trying to understand if regenerative braking actually helps in a city setup like Mumbai, and I'm not sure that it does. In all honesty, I feel like regenerative braking is negative. It doesn't really help you get a lot of power back, because every time you stop the car, you might be sending power back to the battery while slowing down, but you're taking power back from the battery when you're speeding up, when you're accelerating, versus just cruising at a slow, comfortable, constant pace. So I don't think regenerative braking does a lot for you in like a stop and start traffic sort of a situation. And I feel like I can look at the high octane fuel in a similar way, because if I have to press the accelerator a little bit lesser to get to the speed that I want to be driving, it means I'm consuming lesser fuel. This is just me just doing some very basic thinking and non-scientific, to be very honest. Let's see, it'll be cool to see how far I go. I've already done 390 kilometers on the odometer on this tank, and I have 40 kilometers of range left before I get to the same range point at which I filled. I filled the car at 50 kilometers range. So once I get back to 50 kilometer range, I'll see how far I've gone on since I last refueled, and if it's higher than 416, it means high octane fuel is not so good for the wallet. Let's see. I was also thinking if CNG would have made sense, but nah. I think I spoke on that a bit in the morning as well. It's just too much of a hassle. Takes away the pleasure of driving. By the way, this I don't know. I mean, I've changed the phone that I'm recording. I'm actually recording with my old phone now. I've kept my current phone in my pocket because this one doesn't have a SIM, which means I don't get notifications, so it's not distracting. And this phone goes into lock screen mode while recording, and it says that I'm still recording, which is a nice touch. I mean, it's basically recording without showing me the viewfinder on the screen, and I don't mind that because I don't want to be looking at my face all the time. I don't know if I said this, it's been a tiring day, man. I might not talk so much in this one. So if you're studying or if you just want this to play in the background, feel free. At some point I was trying to think about how I feel about this car, the Tata Tiago, because it was, there were other options in the budget as well, and man, I'm really impressed with this car. I mean, it's really comfortable. I mean, it has fabric seats, so you don't feel hot and you don't feel cold. I feel like Rexine, which is typically what the other seat option in this budget range would be. Rexine gets very hot and very cold, man. Like, it's not a comfortable material, and it smells after some time. So I feel like they've done a really good job with the seats. Like, these feel super comfortable. Like, my back is straight. I mean, it's not particularly hugging, but it hugs me enough. And it's got a little bit bolstering on the left and right, which is good for when you're doing a little bit of cornering, which I do tend to do on these roads. The engine's good, man. Like I know, while looking at other options, we felt like we saw a couple of reviews on YouTube. They spoke about how the car is underpowered. It's really not. I mean, how fast do you need to go? I'm going at 50 right now, and it's a very comfortable drive. I don't feel underpowered at all. If I need to overtake, I can downshift and get where I need to pretty quickly. The car revs high in the sense that it has to rev pretty high for me to feel like the car has the kind of power I need. But it does have the power. It's not like it's not there. If you just work your way up to it when you need it. I can probably demonstrate right now because I need to get ahead of these slow pokes. Okay. Yeah, so we're at 1,500 RPM, which is quite low. It's idling at 1,500 on third gear, and we're going at 40. So I'm gonna try and overtake the car in front. I'm gonna downshift. I'm gonna get up to fourth gear, downshift to second, and race in front of the car in front. Not anything dangerous. This is what I would typically do. Yeah, so we're on 4 now, fourth gear, 47 kilometers per hour and 1,500 RPM. When I see a clear line in front of me, I will overtake and we'll downshift, and let's see how the car feels. I think it does a pretty good job at it. It's got a small engine, which I want because I want efficiency. I don't want to be burning a hole through my pocket driving 100 kilometers. Oh, here we go. Yep. So you probably heard that because I revved up to 6,000 RPM, which is pretty high for this car. But I got the speed, man. Like I didn't feel like I was losing speed going up the rev range. It held strong through 4, 5. It kind of topped out at 6, but I feel like that's how it's programmed. I don't think it wants to rev after 6. The odometer goes up to 8, and I definitely don't want to be at 8 with this. So yeah, good job, man, Tata. Pretty solid car. I definitely took a hit on my mileage. Yeah, I took a hit on my mileage, current trip mileage with that. But I mean, it has power. Super comfortable. I've packed in 5 people here many times. Look, I'm tall, so the person behind me is never going to be comfortable, whether it's this car or if it's a sedan. But I mean, it's really good for what it is, and it's perfect. So coming back to the point, I don't know if I would pay big money for a hatchback, man. Like, why would I? Like, I mean, alternate options are sort of your Volkswagen Polo, or there is a Toyota car called Glanza, which was significantly more expensive than this. And other than like a slightly bigger engine, probably better build quality, I'm not seeing that much of a difference. But this is a daily car, man. Like I won't go to the extent of calling it a beater yet, but it is a daily car, and I want to be able to take it wherever I need to go. I don't want to think about where I'm going with the car. The car needs to just get me there safely, and I feel like this car is and can do that. So at what point would I consider upgrading? I'm not sure. Like, obviously, I mean, there is this brand and prestige value that you would get with a better hatchback, but it's a hatchback after all, right? Like, everyone knows hatchbacks are daily drivers. I mean, unless you're buying like an AMG A65 which costs like 2 crores, I don't think your objective is anything other than having a really nice, peppy, comfortable hatchback that you can throw around when you need to. And these roads are bad, man. And look, I hear it, and I'm sure you do too, because there is a fair bit of road noise in this car. But I'm comfortable, man. And if you think about it this way, like I was thinking about what this ride quality is going to do to my shock absorbers and what it's going to do to the fabric of this seat, because I'm constantly like sort of getting pushed up and down in the seat. I am comfortable, my back is good. I actually had back pain while traveling in the Innova that the company gives, but this is so much better, so much more comfortable. So yeah, I'm comfortable. Now coming to the point of like affordability. I mean, it's one thing to like spend less right out when you buy the car, but what about spending less for replacements? Like, think about it this way: like, I can actually replace this entire seat when I feel like the comfort is gone or like the fabric has sunk in, and I can do it at a price that won't feel like I'm making a foolish decision. This seat probably costs 8 or 10,000 rupees max, and with that, I mean, you sit on the seat, right? That's where you interact with the comfort of the car the most. So I feel like, you know, for very reasonable prices, you can make this car feel new again. Similarly, suspension. Like, if the suspension gives eventually, which it will if you drive on these kind of roads, I'll upgrade it with like a much better sort of sturdy performance suspension, and that should go even longer, and the car should feel even better. So it's almost like the car gets better as it gets damaged, which is crazy, right? Coming to the topic of damage, this car, bro, it fell out of the tree right when it was born, bro. I mean, I had this car shipped from Mumbai, shipped in the sense it came by road. It's still called maritime transport, but road maritime transport. And the car took like this detour in the truck on its way. I mean, they told me it'll come here in 5 days, and it was on track to do that. And somewhere on Jaipur highway, like Delhi Jaipur highway, the truck fell off a bridge. I got a call at 11 in the night, the day I was supposed to get the car, because I was calling them in the day. I was like, yeah, so there's a car coming today. Like, your tracker probably doesn't work because it shows that it's not been updated in the last 3 days. So I assumed, you know, that tracking in the truck broke somewhere, and I was like, fine, you know, like, I mean, I would expect such things to happen. But I wanted to check on the car. So I called the guy and I was like, yeah, bro, where is the car? Like, when do I have to receive it? Will it come home? Do I need to go somewhere? And he was like, I'm sorry, but your car the truck has met with an accident. And I was like, bro, this has got to be bullshit. Like, I'm pretty sure he's stolen my car. He's sent the truck somewhere he doesn't want me to know where. And, you know, he's trying to pull a fast one. Like, he's trying to give me some bullshit stories, and he's going to take the car and sort of flee. And I was like, okay, let me press this guy. Like, let me ask him some intelligent questions. And I was like, okay, where has the accident happened? And what happened? Describe the accident to me. Do you have proof that this accident took place? And he was like, you know what? I'm going to send you a YouTube link. And I was like, what? Okay. And he sent me a YouTube link of a local news channel from Kolkata. And the reporter in the channel said that there was a truck in the middle of the night that fell off a bridge. A bridge, like the bridge that I'm driving on right now. Imagine just driving off the bridge with a truck. I mean, obviously, first thought I was like, bro, like, is everyone okay? Like, I mean, I was very pleasantly surprised to know that the truck driver was fine. He did get injured, but he was eventually, taken to the hospital, and he was fine. And there was no passerby vehicle that was hit. That would have been really bad if it did sort of come under the truck. But yeah, man, like the truck flew off a bridge, and there were a bunch of cars in there. I mean, this was one of the smallest, least expensive cars. There were BMWs. There was like a 7 Series. There was an E-Class. I think there was one of those small Range Rovers also. What is it? Evoque, whatever it is. Those cars were at the bottom, because the way they stack in like a double-decker trailer is they'll put the heavy cars at the bottom and the lighter cars on top. So there were 2 Tiagos on top, and there was like one Swift Desire or something like that. So my car was on top, and my car and the other 2 smaller cars were on a platform that separates the 2 parts of the trailer, and the platform fell on the expensive cars at the bottom. The BMW was a pancake. It was an absolute wreckage. So I got these videos right on YouTube, and like news channel reporters going up to the place and be like, oh shit, huge accident. And I was like, bro, how? Like, how can I be this unlucky? Like, this is not the kind of shit you expect. So So I was like, okay, fine, we'll deal with it. I started sort of speaking quite rudely to the transporter, and then I realized that this is not their fault. I mean, they couldn't really do anything about this. But I was pissed because I was like, bro, how come it took you 3 days after the accident to tell me about this? And that too when I called. So when I told you that the tracking stopped 2 days ago, it had because the truck met with an accident and the tracker was in the truck, and I didn't get a call. I'm calling them on the day I'm supposed to get the car, and they tell me that your car is finished. And I'm like, bro, okay, fine. Unfortunate, I get it, not in your hands. But what about communication? I think that's really where good companies get separated from bad ones. I mean, the trucker I went with was this local sort of what do we call it? Local mom pop company that had very bad documentation, very bad sort of paperwork and all. Lala company, very bad paperwork and all. And I was a little skeptical going into it, but it's what the guys at Tata recommended, so then I just sort of went ahead with it. Bro, stay in your lane, bro. So the Tata guys recommended it, and I went with it because I was like, they probably do good business with them, and sort of they'll take extra care that the car reaches without scratches and all. Like, yeah, my major concern was that the car would get scratched. It's a white car, relatively new. I don't want scratches on it, and I got much more than scratches. So I spoke to those guys, and they were like, look, this is now a criminal case. And I was like, why? So it was like, because one of the bikers who was at the bottom of the flyover when the truck flew off filed a complaint saying that part of his bike got injured with the debris, got damaged with the debris. And that was true. Like, I saw the photos, I also saw the video through the news channel and all, and yeah, there was damage, and that the biker had registered a criminal complaint against a driver alleging driving under influence and all. I don't know if DIU actually happened, but DUI actually happened. Look at me trying to be cool. But I mean, the biker filed a criminal complaint, and the case got registered in the Kolkata police station, the local police station out there. I was like, okay, now what? So he was like, look, we'll have to wait for the process to clear, then we'll bring another motor. So like, this was explained to me in very Haryanvi Hindi, and that is how I will do it here. He said, truck में दो पार्ट होता है, एक घोड़ा होता है और एक ट्रेलर होता है. Ghoda is the part that is driving. So the truck has its like engine and driver bogie in the front, and then you have the trailer part behind. So the trailer part can get detached from the engine part, from the sort of driving cubby. And he was like, घोड़े को हम लोग नया घोड़ा लेके आएंगे और ट्रेलर को वापस जोड़ेंगे और फिर गुड़गांव लेके जाएंगे और वहाँ पे फिर सबको बुलाएंगे. तो I was like, भाई मैं गुड़गांव क्यों आऊँ अभी? मतलब मैं चंडीगढ़ से गुड़गांव का खर्चा भी उठाऊँ, गाड़ी तो गई मेरी, उसमें भी डैमेज है तो उसका भी खर्चा उठाना पड़ेगा, और मेरे लिए तो बहुत इनकन्वीनियंट हो गया. एंड ही वाज लाइक, या ब्रो, लाइक you'll have to show up, sorry, like this is how we are going to do it. I was like, great. So I waited a week, and after that they got clearance from the police there to take the carriage to Gurgaon. So they got it towed to Gurgaon, didn't charge, good on them, to do the rest of the process free of charge. They got the trailer to Gurgaon, and then I get a call saying, okay, now it's at Gurgaon. Now we need to clear Gurgaon police process also, because this has come as part of an ongoing investigation. I was like, great, another 1 month gone, another 2 weeks gone. And but I was like, bro, at some point I'm gonna have to step in to speed these things up. So I took a train to Gurgaon, and I got off, like Chandigarh to Gurgaon. I got off at Gurgaon station, and I went to this scrapyard. This was a Maruti Suzuki scrapyard. So this is like the scrapyard adjoining the Maruti Suzuki plant in Gurgaon. I think it's in Mansar or something like that. So I went there to the plant. I saw the trailer, absolutely smashed. Maybe I can like share some photos later on the channel. I'll link the news channel videos also. The absolutely smashed trailer. Okay, and they have like this small window on the trailer from which you can look inside. So I climbed in the trailer and I opened the window and I saw my car. I couldn't see much because it was on the top, and like the floor holding the car had like broken, so like it was sort of slanting. Like my car was at an angle. So I saw the car. I saw that the entire left side of the car is shattered. Like there was glass everywhere. My door was completely smashed. The ORVM, the side mirror, gone completely. Windscreen gone. Roof crumpled. And I mean, half the car was gone, bro. It looked like Steve Harvey after he gets like burnt in Batman. So yeah, it looked pretty bad. And I was like, okay, at least the car is here. I spent a day in Gurgaon. I actually I went to the police station where the complaint was registered, and I told them, look, I need this car in Chandigarh. Is there any way I can sign some papers and get it out from here? They were like, okay, you give us in writing that you will cooperate if we call you back again, and you will let us examine the car. I was like, yeah, fine. I wrote that, I got the car released, and the next day I went back to Chandigarh and I coordinated it on phone, got some help from some relatives to get the car in a trailer and have it sent to Chandigarh. Now the car reaches Chandigarh's Tata workshop, RSA they call it, Roadside Assistance Workshop. There I met Mr. Gurpreet, super friendly uncle Gurpreet ji. Really helped me, like went out of his way to help me with the whole insurance process that I will get into, and just generally like sort of comforted me in the sense that this car will be okay and like we can fix this. So shout out to you, Gurpreet ji, if you happen to see this video. Yeah, so he took the car and he was like, look, it'll take a good 2 weeks, but we need to clear insurance. I was like, okay, yeah. So I took insurance, I took maritime insurance, and I spoke to the trucking company and I was like, guys, I want to claim my maritime insurance because the car was damaged in transport. And here, fuckery part 2 begins. The trucker registered the insurance, so I paid him insurance and I took insurance from him. Like he sold me insurance basically, the truck company. Mistake number 1. Never buy insurance from the truck company. Buy your own goddamn insurance and tell the truck company that you are insured under so and so policy. Do not buy insurance directly from the transporter. I did that. He gave me an invoice saying, yeah, you've paid us 5,000 rupees extra and we'll cover damages up to 80,000 rupees or something like that. He had then taken the 5,000 rupees and he had taken like similar money from different people and bought an insurance package on the vehicle, on his truck, and the entire container load was insured apparently. But instead of writing vehicle insurance, he wrote vehicle part insurance, car parts insurance. So on paper the truck is basically carrying car parts, it's not carrying cars, like assembled cars. I don't know why he did that. I'm guessing getting car parts insured is cheaper than getting entire built up units of cars insured. Like the per kilo cost or whatever metric they have for insurance is lesser in car parts. So he got the entire truckload registered in car parts. And when we claimed insurance, we said that we had an entire car in the truck. And the insurance got rejected because they're like, sorry, like you were insured for car parts, but you have forged your trailer guy, trucker guy has forged the insurance. I was like, you've got to be kidding me, bro. Like I paid this guy, and my invoice with him said car insurance, but that doesn't hold value. The insurance that the trucker finally took from whoever, Bajaj or whoever he took it from, holds value. So I did not get a single rupee from the truck insurance. And the trucker, after he found this out, he stopped answering my calls. Yeah. So now I was stuck. Now I was like, okay, great. Now I have like 2 lakh worth of damage that I'm gonna have to pay for myself on a car that is a couple of months old. Nightmare. That is really where Gurpreet ji came in, because he said that look, you can also claim your car's independent insurance, the insurance you take at the time of purchasing your car, which is like a legal requirement, so everyone has that. And I was like, but the car insurance doesn't cover being moved in a trailer. He was like, see, the car insurance covers being hit while it is stationary, by another car, and we can present this case in a way saying that the car was stationary inside the truck and damage to the truck has then caused damage to the car. And that's exactly how we put it, and we got the insurance. I mean, look, like, it was completely legal. Not just saying, like, we documented the whole process, and the guy came and inspected it. We explained that this was an accident in a transporter, and it got covered in one of those policies itself. So basically, take help from the RSA guys. They've seen it all. They know what will work for you, and be smart about the way you're claiming your insurance. Don't write bullshit, because then you're just gonna get rejected and it's illegal. But she got the insurance passed, got the car fixed at zero cost. You really need to see the before after pictures to like believe it, man. It was really bad. So learned a lot. When I say, I mentioned in the first vlog, I learned a lot about cars. I definitely learned about how car insurance claims work, and a realistic picture of how long it will take to get your insurance claim. Very useful learning, and the car feels great now. I'm always sort of keeping a ear out to hear any rattling or any rocking coming from the left side of the car, because that's where it took a beating. But nothing so far. It's been pretty solid. There are weld points, so like I forgot to turn off the headlights at one point. I mean, of course, that's what you do, right? And the car battery died, and I got someone to jump the car battery using cables. So they basically bring another battery, and they hook up your battery with that battery, and they jump the battery, which is like giving it a high voltage jolt to sort of bring the battery back to life. Momentarily give it some power, and then you are supposed to rev the engine for a couple of minutes to keep feeding power into the car or to charge your battery. So I did that, and the guy who showed up with the jumper wires and the jumper battery set was a car mechanic. So he knew his shit. So he was like, bro, I see some welding joints on your car, like in the engine chassis and all of that. So I was like, yeah. How do you know? He was like, your car has been met with an accident. So I was like, no, my car is not met with an accident. He was like, you're telling me you've got a new car that you're driving around, and you don't even know it has an accident? I was like, oh, okay, look, it was not an accident. It fell off a trailer, yada yada yada. But basically, if you're ever buying a second-hand car, pop the hood, you'll see crossbars. I mean, look, it's not a racing car, so you're not going to see like a roll cage or anything, but you'll see some sort of crossbars that sort of stabilize the engine part of the chassis and give your car some like torsional rigidity. Those crossbars will take a hit, like they'll typically crack if you've been in a bad accident. You should pop the hood open and look at those crossbars. Studying those crossbars will actually tell you if this car has had severe damage to the extent that you need to be concerned or not. So if you're buying a car and like the principal owner says, oh, you've never had an accident, and like this is a car in like absolute brand new spot on condition, he's bullshitting when you see weld joints in the chassis of the car. There you go, another useful tip. I also had a puncture. I'll probably cover that a little later. Although I don't think it was a punch. I think someone snuck a nail behind my tire. Probably kids or something had parked it in a slightly sketchy area. But yeah. Something unique. I signed up as an Uber driver. Why? Because I'm driving 100 kilometers a day, and only if I get someone on the way on my journey, I would not mind giving them a lift and taking a good $500,000 from them. My two-way travel will be free. I can also order a Subway for dinner. The person who gave me that idea knows who they are, and I would not mind like a couple of ₹1,000 a month for fuel to keep this channel going and to get me to work. So Uber, registered as an Uber driver, and Ola. I also did it just for kicks. Like I like to whenever I feel like there is a huge industry coming up, or like there's a huge business space being created, and I feel like it is not possible for me to, by natural progression, learn some aspect of that business, I find it really exciting to get in there and take up like sort of out of the way experiences. So this is definitely one of them. Right? I do not need to be driving an Uber and an Ola. I am an engineer from BITS Pilani and I have a good job. But I don't want to at the same time feel like I don't understand anything on the supplier end of the whole ride-hailing service. So I think there's always something nice to learn. Like there's always this sort of aha moment or this sort of insight that you get from and you get this insight when if you ever explore like driving someone around in an Uber or an Ola, you get an insight from a service that you've been using for so long, but an insight from the side of that service that you will never experience. Similarly, if you ever get to walk into a Instamart dark store, do it, man. Like you've been using them every single day. It'll tell you so much about how the business works and how the business is set up. I find this kind of stuff super interesting. I mean, going into a dark store, becoming a Rapido driver every once in a while and just sort of seeing how it feels and what it looks like and what you can realistically earn. Also, I remember speaking to this gentleman who was driving me around, and like, I mean, speaking to him, I felt like he probably doesn't do Rapido or Uber or driving around for a living. And I was like, so what do you do? I mean, you speak really well, you have clean communication. He was talking to me about politics and business. So I was like, yeah, you probably don't need this, right? He was like, no man, I have 25 cabs. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, I have set up a completely functional business for myself. I have hired 25 drivers. They drive around 25 of my cabs, and I make, like, he mentioned a figure in the lakhs every month. And I was like, dude, that's awesome. Like, how do you? And he explained to me his entire geofencing strategy and how geofencing as in GEO fencing and Geo as in GIO, the telecommunications company, has created this really smart GPS tracking tool for cars. So the way cars electrical systems work is that you have like what they call the ECU panel of the car, which is where all your main circuitry and electrical wiring sits, and there are some empty plugs in the ECU. And when you take your car to the service center and you have, like, let's say you have a fault on the car or display, like you have some sort of an engine fault or something like that, they're going to plug in a diagnostic cable into the ECU's open slot. It's basically like hooking your phone up to your computer to transfer media files. So basically hooking your car up to a computer to diagnose whatever errors and faults it's throwing at you. And Geo figured out that there are empty slots in the ECUs of all cars, and besides like the service center guys, you as a car owner can also leverage those empty points. So they created a module that fits into the empty plugs of your ECU, and it basically gives you a very accurate all-time on GPS of your car. And that's how you can set up geofencing for your vehicles. Like your vehicle could automatically drop power to like 30 kilometers per hour speed or something like that when it crosses the geofence, all through that small computational chip that Geo has provided, which was really cool. And he was like, he has set up his entire cab ecosystem on this. He knows where his cars are. He knows how much his cars should have potentially earned through the location that they have traveled through. Like he knows how much the car should potentially earn through the areas that the driver has driven through, and if it's not earning that much, he knows that there's something off. Like maybe the driver is taking payments in his personal account or something like that, or the driver has started a second Uber, a Rapido Captain or a Uber driver app, and now is earning income besides the app that you as a cab owner have set up for the driver. So really solid insights. And like, I mean, if you want to set up a side hustle and you have additional capital lying around, you can legitimately start a cab business for yourself. It should not take a lot of effort. it'll put a lot of the people I know in a very not so outside their comfort zone. But hey, man, like if someone's making money from it, it's a legit business. So yeah, we've reached home. Yeah, it's been a cool second video. I genuinely thought talking might not be this easy, the whole ride. But I'm having fun, and I hope you guys are too. Alright, awesome. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.